The original creator of God of War hates the new Kratos despite the massive success of the series, and uploaded to YouTube is his entire testament that the direction of the modern day God of War series is something he is not a fan of.
I don't want these characters to grow. I don't give a fuck what you're going through at the studio. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. If you're going to build a brand new IP, or you're going to build a character into the God of War lore, and that character is struggling or dealing with your problems that a lot of you guys that have gotten older and girls at the studio have dealt with, that's wonderful. Do that shit all day long. But don't take the character Kratos or Indiana Jones and go, you know what? I'm Steven Spielberg. I'm older now, and I'm really into family, and I want to tell stories about fathers and sons and God. No, fuck you.
Hello and welcome. In this video we'll talk about why God of War future iterations, I believe, should actually look back to the past, to the first original trilogy, rather than the 2018 and Ragnarok game design. And it's primarily because I believe that, simply put, the older games were superior in terms of narrative, in terms of gameplay, in terms of cohesion between narrative and gameplay, and the general form of those games suited the themes of God of War stories far better than the new way that it was done. Now, I understand this is quite an old debate that most people had in 2018, and then the game came out and people loved the game, so that debate kind of died out. But just because people in general love the game doesn't mean that the game was better than something like God of War 3 or God of War 2 even. I think it was a great game. I thought that Ragnarok was better in a lot of ways than 2018, although 2018 narratively was more cohesive and just it was a far better experience in a single run. But God of War Ragnarok, even though it tried to do a lot of things, even though it was convoluted on a lot of places, and the pacing problems were overwhelming, I still do think they are great games, but maybe they're just not my cup of tea. But also maybe they just don't, like, the way it was done doesn't really fit the theme of exploring the lives of gods from these ancient mythologies. And the reason I believe that we will discover later on. But now, just to illustrate the point here, I want to show you the first minute or so of the opening of God of War 3, and let's do a little exercise here. Tell me please, what adjectives would you use to describe this scene?
My brothers, we were forged in victory. A victory that ended the Great War and brought forth the reign of Mount Olympus. Born from the depths of the underworld, rooted in the river of souls, our mountain emerged out of the chaos. As it grew, so too did the might of the Olympians. We created a world of peace, a world of prosperity, a world that lives in the shadow and safety of my mountain. A mountain that has come to be the absolute measure of strength and power.
So as for me, I would use visceral, raw, powerful, hierarchical, masculine, and brutal. Now to compare, let's watch the first minute or so, the introduction of God of War Ragnarok. Now as for me, I would use adjectives such as melancholic, slow, emotional, tactful, grudgingly done. And the point is, in the original God of War games, gods are portrayed with a harshness that aligns closely with ancient Greek mythology, the way they were perceived originally. Think of Zeus, as depicted in Homer's Iliad, where he and the other Olympians are anything but benevolent. They are capricious, selfish, and often enjoy human suffering, much like in the games where Kratos battles these deities. Here's some example of that. Let's watch God of War 2 Kratos versus Zeus fight, and in general how the vibe is, and how would you describe Zeus in this scene.
We have faced far worse than this one fallen mortal. But we are the gods. We whom the mortals worship. We who rule over this land. We who will not be swept aside by this petulant fool. Brothers, put aside the petty grievances that have splintered us for so long. We will unite, we will stand together, and I will wipe out this plague. Olympus will prevail.
I believe this kind of portrayal mirrors the portrayal of the Homer's Iliad, for example, where gods are described as feasting on the spectacle of human warfare. In Book 7, where Athena and Apollo meet, quote, "They sat in the likeness of vultures on the tall oak tree of Zeus, who holds the aegis, taking their pleasure in the men, and the ranks sat close together, bristling with shields and helmets and spears." Although sometimes gods do aid humans, they do not do it out of altruism, but their own selfish gain and the grudge they hold against other gods. This state of the world is called theomachy. The world of early God of War games captures this spirit perfectly, not only in its narrative, but combat and game design is equally. The new games, though they represent great craft, are skated by postmodern sense of deconstruction, which is an attempt to delete the ideas of good and evil from art and make the audience feel sorry about the villains, or even question the worth of the heroes. Take Odin in God of War Ragnarok. Unlike the distant and cruel Zeus, Odin is portrayed with layers of complexity, showing paranoia, ambition, but also a quest for knowledge, making him relatable yet formidable. His whole character is in the open. He is psychoanalyzed in exposition. He is a villain that we should empathize with. But if we do that, we cannot brutalize him. The sense of otherness and ultimate threat is lost. We no longer hate the antagonist with visceral hatred that Kratos had for the Olympians in the first trilogy. Let's look at a few examples. Here's a scene of God of War 1, Kratos versus Ares, final battle.
Remember, Kratos, it was I who saved you in your time of greatest need.
I haven't forgotten, Ares. I remember how you saved me.
That night, I was trying to make you a great warrior.
You succeeded.
Now let's compare it with Freya, who lost her child to Kratos and his son, feeling compassion to them and showing them mercy. Highly unbelievable for the character of one of the Valkyries, the prime Valkyrie warriors of Odin.
Atreus. Atreus. Are you harmed?
This evolution not only affects how we view these mythical figures, but also how we engage with them. The original games offered a spectacle of power and revenge, whereas the newer entries invite us into a narrative rich with character development. I don't think that either is wrong. I just think that if you are doing a game featuring gods of all beings instead of humans, for example, the first approach is better. Not only because for the reasons of consistency with the original mythology, but also for the following reasons. For example, the spectacle is greater in the first approach, as the characters which are distant psychologically are always greater than life. The fact we can't identify with them makes them so much more believable if they are gods. This obviously helps with immersion as well. Furthermore, the fact that you have clearly defined villains makes the game more accessible and universal. Kratos being a tragic hero and clearly justified in his quest for revenge in the first trilogy also contributed to that effect of clarity. Finally, this kind of approach to the narrative could contribute to the return to form on the gameplay level as well, as brutal combat and epic set pieces would be far more cohesive with strong motivation and clearly defined villains and heroes, something akin to Odysseus brutally murdering his wife's suitors in Homer's Odyssey. In any case, tell me how you feel about the future of God of War. Would you prefer the return to the form, or do you really find the merits of the new approach irreplaceable? And would you like to see Kratos again or some new characters? Personally, if we're going back to Greece, I feel that Kratos or some version of Kratos, whether younger Kratos or older Kratos, would be interesting to explore. If we're going to Egypt, I would be willing to give a chance to a new protagonist just to expand the cinematic universe they have here. I don't think that would be such a bad thing, as long as the new character is equally as badass and cool to play with. So tell me how you feel about it, and until next time, cheers.